Hello and welcome to the Eurasia Center Podcast. I am your host, Jamie Davis, and today I'll be talking to Iris Stankic, a fellow intern at the Eurasia Center, about an article she wrote on Republika Srpska's secession threats. Without further ado, here's the conversation. Hello, Iris, and welcome to the podcast. So you wrote your article on Bosnia and Herzegovina and the situation there right now. Just for everyone listening who maybe doesn't know, can you give us a brief summary of Bosnia since the breakup of Yugoslavia to give kind of a background to all of this?
Yeah, of course. So during the 1990s, Yugoslavia was Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, Montenegro, Slovenia, and everything got split up. Amidst that split up of countries, there was especially a lot of atrocities committed in Bosnia on an ethnic basis. And to resolve that, there was international intervention on the US's part with the Dayton Accords. However, there is currently still a negative peace in Bosnia. So even though there is no outright conflict going on right now, tensions amongst Bosnia's three main ethnic groups, the Croats, Serbs, and the Bosniaks, still remain very high. The economy is completely down. There's a lack of domestic industry like there was in Yugoslavia. As a result of that, unemployment is still very high as well. And there has been extreme brain drain in the country. A lot of the country's population left right after the wars in the 1990s, and people still continue to leave today because of this unemployment for other Western countries such as Germany, Austria, United States. So the lack of skilled workers as well is contributing to that economic downfall too.
Definitely. So Bosnia is split among the three ethnic groups, and the agreement that was made to run their government basically was called the Dayton Agreement that was signed at the end of the war. So could you give us like the briefest explanation for like how it works?
Yeah, of course. I'll give like a very brief rundown. So currently, Bosnia is divided between two entities. So there's the Federation, which is run by Bosnians and the Croats. And then the Serbs have their own entity, which is Republika Srpska. However, in central institutions, each ethnic group is assured representation and power, which was one of the key principles to ending the war. So just to see what that looks like, the president's role, for instance, there's three members for this one role. And the same quotas apply to Bosnia's two legislative bodies as well. However, because there is this like assurance of power for each ethnic group, this has made for a very unproductive government that is constantly in deadlock, and it is extremely difficult to pass anything really. And one more thing to note too, there are also government roles for international actors, people that are not even from the country, which assures a continuous of heavy international involvement in the country.
Wonderful. So if I have this right, there are these two kind of parallel governments with the government of the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, that is the federal government, the internationally recognized government that coexists with this like subordinate state, Republic of Srpska. And of course, the president of the Republika Srpska has been making a lot of news lately. So who is President Dodik and why is he important in today's context?
Yeah, so Dodik is the president of the Republika Srpska entity, and basically Dodik symbolizes everything about the extreme escalation of politics that have been happening in Bosnia. And he also falls into this like general global trend of a rise in the extreme right, and he also draws inspiration from people in the extreme right.
So when you talk about the extreme right in this context, what is that in the Bosnian Serbian context? Is that related to the Bosnian genocide? What is the situation there?
Yeah, so a lot of Dodik's rhetoric has been insulting Muslim people straight out and trying to provoke the Bosnian Muslim population, um, denying genocide, denying Srebrenica, and also just extreme Serbian nationalism. And we have also seen even spreading to educational institutions themselves, historical revisionism of the Serb identity.
So this has been roughly the state of events since the end of the Yugoslav wars and the war in Bosnia. But what is happening today that is particularly concerning? Why is Bosnia back in the news?
Yeah, so Dodik has basically been threatening secession for years now. But the reason why there's a great cause for concern is that he has created legislation to pull out of key central state institutions. And a lot of scholars have said, like, oh, if this happens, like if they attempt to pull out of the institutions, this is a legitimate secession attempt. And this is also particularly concerning because the separate Bosnian Serb military that existed during the breakup of the Yugoslav states was the one that committed mass atrocities against the Bosnian Muslim population. And one of the propositions of the legislation was for Republika Srpska to have a separate national army. So that just made like a lot of people reminiscent of the past and have a lot of fear. And having the joint state institutions and a joint national army was one of the biggest points of progress that Bosnia had after the war, which is now basically being threatened.
So in your view, what is the way forward? Is secession plausible at this point?
In my opinion, I think what needs to happen in Bosnia is definitely the de-ethnicization of politics. Because the government is in complete deadlock right now. It's one of the reasons why there has been no notable progress in this country, and having political parties based off ethnic groups, as we see in many other developing nations, just doesn't create for a good democracy. So that's first of all. And to address your point about secessionism, in agreement with scholars, and even in technical terms, it's not really plausible. Most international institutions have a strong opposition against it. There's no leeway for it in the Dayton Accords allowing for it. And just in terms of the identity of the state, Bosnia has always been known as a multi-ethnic state, and I believe that it will continue to be a multi-ethnic state. Its diversity is always what has made it unique and rich. So allowing the Serbs to secede would basically completely ruin that. And also it would likely spark a movement amongst Croatians as well. So essentially what would happen is that the country would just end up being completely partitioned. It would create a crisis for minorities that would have to leave their homes and move. And lastly, many ethnic Bosnians would also be against this because it would be, to them, it would be interpreted as a legitimization, as an okay for all the atrocities that happened to them and the genocide.
I think it is really beautiful that Bosnian national identity has kind of this multi-ethnic, multicultural identity that unfortunately is threatened by the ethnic tensions and the threatening of secession by the Serbs. So what should the US and EU be doing about it? What can we do to help? What can our governments do to help?
Yeah, so first, before I answer the question, you brought up a really important point about the national identity. I think one of the main struggles of this country is that there is basically no pride in the national identity. The ethnization of politics has basically just been pushing everyone to align more with their ethnic identity rather than the identity of the nation. And that's why no progress is being made. And that's why Republika Srpska's main policy basically has just been these threats of secession. And now what the EU and the US should be doing about it, I think something that's really important for this crisis is that politicians need to be cooperating. And I think that the US and the EU have also already been like trying to like get these politicians to sit down together to get out of their deadlock and to discuss this. And also, what needs to happen is there needs to be an avoidance of fear mongering in this instance as well, because this is like a very escalating situation that can lead tensions to spark even more. So what's really important in this moment right now is to educate the population alongside all other politicians of the implausibility of secession. And this is important because, as we know, image is basically everything in politics and international affairs. So, therefore, trying to de escalate the situation and reduce the severity associated with it is going to be really important to bring tensions down and make sure that nothing sparks up, and also going to be important to delegitimizing Dodik's hateful and essentially unfactual rhetoric.
Thank you so much, Iris. Thanks for coming on today. It was wonderful to hear from you.
Thank you so much.
And that's the show. Thank you for listening. We'll be back again with more news and analysis from America to Eurasia. If you enjoyed this show, please like, subscribe, and share. You can find more of the Eurasia Center at www.eurasiacenter.org. That's www.eurasiacenter.org. And as always, have a fantastic day.